This episode of Inside Golf Podcast is brought to you by Inside Sports Network.
What's up, everybody? It's your boy, Boston Capital Truist, Steve, on the Hold the Green podcast.
All right, we are live. Tap in, birdie.
All right, Carson Young is here.
I bet Ludwig at 28.
Let's go. I bet
You
him
did
at,
too?
I bet him at 25.
Low sevens. I think there's some guys in here we like.
Harris English at 7,300.
I love Brian Harmon at 3.5% this week.
What's up, guys? It's producer Cam here. ISN is now partnered with Shorty's Golf. Shorty's Golf is designed to provide kids with the perfect introduction to the game of golf by offering high-quality clubs and equipment specifically tailored to their need. They offer custom sizes for various age groups, ensuring that the kids have clubs that are tailored to their height and strength. They feature fun, vibrant colors and lightweight stand bags that are easily adjustable. Each set features real stainless steel clubs, high-quality materials, and sturdy construction, making them long-lasting while providing a real golf experience. So go check them out, golfshorties.com. Use ISN15 at checkout for $15 off your purchase.
Okay, we are back. Inside Golf Podcast, Truist Championship betting and DFS preview. We've got a lot to get to today. I am incredibly fired up and inspired to talk about this golf course. Weeks like these are really my bread and butter, and I've spent a lot of time over the past couple of days really thinking about Philly Cricket Club, how the golf course is going to play. And I would say that I'm incredibly confident in my ability to figure out exactly how the golf course will play, what type of player we should be looking for, what stats matter, what exactly the winning score is going to be, and the scoring average is going to be. In terms of who's going to win the actual golf tournament, truly have never felt more lost at the moment. Like, I have been trying to unplug a little bit more, at least this weekend, balance out my life a little bit more, stop putting so much pressure on myself. Like, my girlfriend's in town this weekend. So often when she visits over the weekend, I'm still like, okay, I need to watch the golf. I need to be posting all my takes in the Discord 24 hours a day. And I was like, I took one look at this leaderboard. I was like, you know what? It's okay. I'm going to be present for her this weekend. I've checked on the leaderboard a couple of times. I've not watched a single second of this golf tournament. And I'm just like, what the absolute fuck is this leaderboard? Like, every single week, I feel like I put together a really sound, well thought out betting card. I get insane amounts of CLV every single week. Like, I get the best number on every single bet that I place every single week. The market always moves with me. They feel like great bets every single week. Really well thought out bets. And the guys just never fucking win. It came so easily last year. Like, every week last year, it was like, okay, either hit the winner or at minimum, bunch of guys in the mix. I hit 10 outrights. I won 64 units in betting, 24% ROI in DFS. Like, every week, it's either an outright sweat or always mixing in the single entry. I had 7 top 10 finishes in the $100 single entry. And this year, it's like none of my fucking guys win ever. My DFS pool is always still good enough to like hover around a min cash, but I've had 1 top 10 in the single entry all year. And yeah, I've had some good outright sweats, but never have the fucking winner. And I'm just like, I don't know what to do anymore. My process in terms of modeling and figuring out how the golf course is going to play has never been more dialed. I try so much fucking harder this year now that I'm running this company than I ever had in years past. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I feel like I make great bets every single week and they just never fucking win. It's like destroying me. So I can tell you, I will give you exactly how the golf course is going to play, what type of player you should be looking for. But in terms of the player that actually wins, no fucking idea anymore. The board might as well be in Latin right now. Like I looked at this leaderboard at TPC Greg Ranch. And it's like, okay, yeah, I suppose we were due for one of these Scotty weeks. I played Scotty. I have some great Scotty lineups. But like, what is this leaderboard? I know it's a goofy event with a decent amount of putting variance. But all my guys, they all make the cut. They all play fine. Never fucking win. So let's dive into Philly cricket. We will do what I do best, which is break down the architecture of the golf course and communicate as effectively and eloquently as I possibly can about how the golf course is going to play, what types of players you should be looking for, who makes the most sense, who I think should play well. And who knows, maybe it will help somebody else find the winner because I don't think it's going to be me right now. But all right, we got a lot to talk about with Philly cricket. So let's get into it. Start big picture here. And then I'm going to get into some of the agronomy stuff, the fairways, the greens, the rough, the hazards, the par and length of the golf course and how that is going to be relayed into proximity buckets, all of that stuff that will help us identify how the golf course is actually going to play for these guys. But let's start big picture here with the club, because Philly cricket holds the very honorable distinction of being America's oldest country club. Now, there are a couple country clubs that have claimed this and will claim this, but Philly cricket, in my book, from what I have known and read, established in 1854, oldest country club in America. And as the name suggests, the focus of the club was cricket before it was golf. The club actually didn't acquire the plot of land that was sufficient to build a golf course on until 1920 when it moved to Flourtown, Pennsylvania. And A.W. Tillinghast, a native of Philadelphia, he helped identify the land. And by then, he had already established himself as one of golf's premier designers. By this point, Tillinghast had already designed Pittsburgh Field Club and Quaker Ridge, for that matter, which is a personal favorite of mine. And he would go on to design Winged Foot, San Francisco Golf Club, Bethpage, Somerset Hills, which are still widely recognized as amongst the greatest golf courses in America. And even through all of that, Philly cricket was where he chose to call home and play the vast majority of his golf. George Thomas, actually, the architect responsible for Riviera, Los Angeles Country Club, Bel Air Country Club, he was also a member of Philly cricket. And this golf course specifically was a major influence on many of George Thomas's golf courses. So, there's no Riviera or LACC or Bel Air without Philly cricket. George Thomas came from that Philadelphia school of design, uh, along with Tillinghast, obviously, and George Crump, the guy who designed Pine Valley, the guy who designed Marion. And those golf courses that George Thomas went on to design, still recognized today as American masterpieces and really the best that the West Coast has to offer. So this club and this golf course was tremendously meaningful, um, in terms of being responsible for some of the greatest architecture in America. Okay, now the important part, how will this architecture hold up? How will the golf course actually play for professionals? For starters, it's been rerouted from how it usually plays for members. So the first hole of the tournament will actually play as the 8th hole for members, and the 7th hole for members will play as the finishing hole of the tournament. So while I cannot tell you exactly how difficult the golf course will play for the best players in the world, I can share this piece of insight, and that is that Philadelphia golf culture and this membership in particular, and I've gotten a lot of insight from members here, they are an incredibly proud bunch. And the one thing that they specifically pride themselves on, not just at Philly Cricket, but also at all of the other great private clubs in the Philadelphia area, Marion, Pine Valley, even Aronimink, Philly Cricket being kind of the main one, or one of the main big couple, but the speed and challenge of its greens. Okay. That is ingrained in Philadelphia golf culture. And I can tell you definitively from being fortunate enough to play a lot of other Tillinghast courses, specifically Quaker Ridge, San Francisco Golf Club, and Somerset Hills, which are, in my humble opinion, amongst the greatest golf courses in America. There's not a Tillinghast golf course that I have played that isn't defined by the challenge of its greens. And the challenge of Tillinghast greens is very subtle. Like, they do not feature giant humps and mounding. They're not bold, in your face. They aren't dramatically undulating like you would see at certain modern golf courses designed by, a Tom Doak or a Kyle Franz. Tillinghast greens are far more subtle in their undulations, and they actually look kind of flat. And that's what ends up making them so hard, is that a common refrain that you will hear at any Tillinghast golf course is like confusion after walking off the greens, because they're never flashy or bold. They never have these giant humps and giant contours that are in your face, but then you still walk away from any Tillinghast course. And I've played a lot of golf on Tillinghast courses. I still always walk away on any Tillinghast with far more three putts than I do in an average round of golf. And while many of the best Philadelphia courses are a gaping hole in my resume, like, I've never played Philly Cricket. I'm dying to. I've never played Marion. I've never played Pine Valley or Aronimink. But I can tell you from being very engaged in the golf course architecture community that Philadelphia in particular is very, very proud about the high quality of their golf and specifically the challenge of their golf courses. Like that is ingrained in their culture. And even more specifically, the speed of their greens. So if I had to make a guess in terms of what I know about this membership, this golf course is going to play harder than people think, harder than it would look on the scorecard. The quality of architecture at this course is just at such a higher level than PGA Tour players are used to. This golf course, Philly Cricket, has every bit the architectural chops and challenge of Winged Foot, which probably is the best comp to Philly Cricket from an architecture standpoint, especially in terms of the greens. Yet the largest difference between Philly Cricket and Winged Foot is that Philly Cricket is 400 yards shorter. The fairways are probably a little bit wider. I mean, it depends what they're going to do with the mowing lines, but it seems like the fairways are going to be a great, certainly compared to Winged Foot, wider fairways, right? And while the rough will be thick, it won't be US Open thick, okay? The par fours at Philly Cricket are just too short, right? There's 12 par fours on the golf course, and only 3 of them, 11, 15, and 17, will definitely put a middle to long iron in a player's hands. The other 9 par fours are driver wedge for anyone with a carry distance north of 300 yards. And when you place a wedge in the hands of a pro golfer on 50% of their holes, it doesn't matter if the greens are impossible. Tour players are just going to give themselves a ton of 15 footers for birdie. And even if these are the hardest 15 footers to convert on the PGA Tour, which they will be, professional golfers are still going to convert on those chances. And that's the push and pull of this golf course and how it will play for PGA Tour players. Like the quality of the architecture is every bit the standards of a US Open venue like Marion, Winged Foot, or Oakmont. The greens at Philly Cricket are that good. They really are. These are probably the best greens that pros will face on the PGA Tour outside of Augusta and Oakmont all year. It's actually quite silly that a major is being hosted at Quail Hollow the week after because Philly Cricket is of such higher quality from an architectural perspective. And because the golf course is just not long enough, there will be some low scores, but not half as low as they would be at any other PGA Tour venue of the same length. This is like, let's think about another golf course of pretty much the same length that we just saw on the PGA Tour host a signature event. Okay. This golf course is not very much longer than Harbor Town. Okay. And it's actually also a lot less claustrophobic off the tee than Harbor Town. Like Harbor Town to this day still does a great job of taking driver out of a player's hands. And I don't expect Philly Cricket to take driver out of a player's hands. The fairways here are wider than they are at Harbor Town and at Winged Foot. And on many of the par fours, players will have a short iron in their hands, even if they decide to club down. Okay. So, point being, This golf course will provide about as much architectural challenge as a golf course can at 7,100 yards, but it's just simply too short to play all that much harder than, say, the toughest version of Harbor Town, right? So let's think about this for a second. The hardest that Harbor Town has played in the last 5 years was in 2022 when the scoring average was minus 0.55 and the winning score was a 13 under playoff between Jordan Spieth and Patrick Cantlay. That could be what we see at Philly Cricket, right? And as far as driver wedge golf courses go, this is the hardest version of a driver wedge fest that players will face all year, but it's still too much driver wedge. Okay. Um, and there are still some spring showers in the forecast for Monday and Tuesday of tournament week, but I have full confidence that this grounds crew and the membership will dial this place up to the absolute maximum in terms of the speed of its greens. But to provide a real test for the modern PGA Tour Pro, you have to take a wedge out of their hands as much as possible. Okay. To test the modern professional golfer, you need good architecture, length, firm greens, and wind, to be honest with you, to challenge the modern PGA Tour player. You need all of those things with what technology and equipment is at this stage of the game in 2025 to really test the modern PGA Tour player. And that's why the Masters and the US Open are the hardest golf courses on the schedule every year, because those are the only golf courses on the schedule every year that have all of those things. They are the only golf courses with good architecture, length, firm greens, and sometimes even wind. This golf course, Philly Cricket, will have the best architecture possible as well as firm greens, but its upside as a true challenge is limited when upwards of 50% of the approach shots will be from inside 150 yards. So my guess is that this golf tournament is won at 14 to 18 under par with a scoring average of 1.25 strokes under par. Okay, so let's dive into the stats that actually matter here. Actually, first, let's run through the specs of the golf course really quickly. So the golf course itself measures, it's a par 70, 4 par 3s, 2 par 5s, 12 par 4s. It measures 7,119 yards. Tillinghast, which we already talked about, was the original designer in 1922 with a renovation from Keith Foster in 2013. The greens are A1, A4 bent grass, measuring 5,779 square feet. So these are absolutely some of the smallest putting surfaces on the PGA Tour. The fairways, 007 bent grass, measuring 32 yards wide. So the fairways are pretty wide, and typically you can generally spray the ball off the tee at Tillinghast golf courses, right? There's generally a fair amount of room off the tee, and it's very similar to Winged Foot in the sense that there's narrow-ish fairways, although these are a little bit wider than Winged Foot, and thick rough lining the fairways. There's actually some fescue here as well and some even taller grass. But for the most part, it's turf type, tall fescue measuring 3 inches. And it looks like to me they will grow the rough up pretty much as they can. This, as I've mentioned already in this podcast quite a bit, is a very proud membership that I know has its sights set on hosting a PGA Championship or a US Open in the future. And this is a bit of the testing ground for this, right? For that to happen is if this golf course holds up and provides enough of a challenge for PGA Tour pros, then ideally, maybe this can hold up to host a more serious event in the future. I know that's what the membership wants. I am a member at a club that has hosted PGA championships and major championships in the past, and every single one of the members always wants the golf course to play hard. Okay. They take a lot of pride in when the golf course plays hard, because then you get to say, "Wait, look at my home club. This is the golf course that I play every single day. Look how much the pros are struggling on this golf course," right? It just happened. My club in Los Angeles just hosted an LPGA event a week ago. Okay. And the entire membership, all they cared about was making sure that it was hard enough, and as much of a test for the ladies in this case as possible. Same deal at Oak Hill, right? And this membership in particular, very proud about how hard and fast these greens are. So my guesstimation here is that the rough will not be US Open rough, but they'll have it dialed up, especially with the greens and the speed of the greens as well. They'll have it dialed up as much as possible. Now, how is this going to affect off the tee and the particular skills categories that I care about this week? I already made it clear that for me, this is far more of a golf course that is going to be defined by wedge play and putting. I believe that wedge play and putting is going to be the main skill separator at this golf course, far more than off the tee. I would actually argue that I believe off the tee is going to be significantly devalued in comparison to short iron play and putting. And here's how I would explain why. I've already heard some rumblings, have gotten some texts that distance off the tee is a narrative that might be forming as a major separating factor this week. And I don't agree with that. At the end of the day, here's the best way that I would explain why I don't agree with that. The golf courses where distance matters the most are golf courses that are long. Okay. And the reason for that is very simple. The delta between scoring from 150 to 200 yards is greater than the delta in scoring between 75 yards and 125 yards, right? The true reason why distance matters on long golf courses is less so defined by how longer players benefit and more so defined by how shorter players struggle, right? Longer players benefit on every single golf course, okay? But the golf courses where distance really matters are the ones where shorter players get killed, okay? The golf courses where distance really matters are the ones where shorter players can't compete and get hit with a bunch of really long approach shots, okay? So, for example, the delta in scoring, as I've mentioned, from 75 to 125 yards, that's way less from 175 to 225 because there are so many PGA Tour players that are just as good from 125 yards than they are from 75 yards. So on a golf course where Rory McIlroy has 75 yards in every time, and he will have a lot of that on many of the par fours at Philly Cricket, where if you bomb the ball like Rory does, hit your 330-yard drive, you are going to have a lot of approach shots between 50 and 125 yards. Okay. But at that distance of 50 to 100, on average 75 yards that a bomber will have in, he is not really, Rory McIlroy in this case, is not really gaining that much of an advantage over a Russell Henley or a Colin Morikawa at 125 yards, right? In fact, Colin Morikawa and Russell Henley are often better at 125 yards than Rory is at 75. Okay. The golf courses where Rory really has an advantage over Russell Henley and Colin Morikawa are the ones where Rory has 175 in and Henley and Morikawa have 225 in. Okay. This would be the most elementary way that I would explain why distance will not be a key separator at Philly Cricket compared to something like wedge play and putting, right? The par fours are just too short for shorter players to be truly penalized here. And they're often at such an awkward length. Like there are a lot of par fours that are around 400 to 420 yards at Philly Cricket that a Rory McIlroy off the tee will leave himself with some very awkward distances coming in. And ultimately, I would focus far more of your attention this week on short iron play and putting on this golf course than I would on distance or truly off the tee at all. My weight on general off the tee play is below average that of a standard PGA Tour course. And I am not looking at distance here at all because all of the par fours on this golf course are generally short enough that if you are awesome from 100 yards, 125 yards, 150 yards, and guys like Russell Henley and Morikawa at most on all of these par fours are still going to have what I would define as a scoring club in their hands, that the golf course is just too short for shorter players to be truly penalized here. And that's why I believe the key separator on this golf course will be short iron play and putting. So generally, in all of the Tillinghast golf courses that I've ever played, and I would really define San Francisco Golf Club and Quaker Ridge as very similar. They have this key through line between all of them where they're very generous off the tee. And you could kind of hit driver wherever you want. It's important for amateur players are more affected by angles than pro players are. But generally, at all of these golf courses, you have to make your bread on your short irons and your putting, right? Off the tee, a poor drive at this golf course, it's really going to result in a penalty stroke. Like there's a meandering creek through some of the holes. And yeah, it's often going to lead to a tougher shot coming in based on the angle that you have. But it really just, it's a short enough golf course that you could really pick your spot in any of these fairways. And it's completely defined by the approach shot coming in and how many 15 footers for birdie that you're even going to make. In fact, if anything, I would care more about accuracy than distance here, really. And I'm lower on off the tee in general than I would be at any golf at the average PGA Tour golf course, right? Where you generally are in this position where the golf course is so short that shorter players can make up for any off the tee disadvantage that they might have based on how short these par fours are, right? So again, like it's all going to come down to if a player is awesome from 100 to 150 yards, generally it's easy for many players, many great wedge players, guys like Justin Thomas, Colin Morikawa, Russell Henley, Hideki Matsuyama, even Tommy Fleetwood. I'm trying to think of some of the other, or I'll actually just pull it up right now because I'm looking heavily this week at kind of overall proximity from 100 to 150 yards based on the length of the par fours when I mapped out the golf course and went through all of the proximity distances. You're going to have like 50% of your shots are going to be from inside 150 yards. So all of these players, like going through it now, I'll give you this year, the best players from 100 to 150 yards: Justin Thomas, Colin Morikawa, Russell Henley, JJ Spawn, Lucas Glover, Brian Harmon, Wyndham Clark. Wyndham Clark's actually a sneaky, really good wedge player. Even guys like Corey Connors, another great example of this, Chris Kirk, Andrew Novak. If those guys are awesome from 100 to 150 yards, like Rory McIlroy, these bombers, they're going to have to beat those guys at 75 yards. And they're going to have a lot of awkward wedge distances coming in that is not necessarily that much of an advantage over a shorter player if they are good from 100 to 150 yards, right? So for me, when I put all of this together in a model and I basically went lower than I normally would for my weight on off the tee in general, really dialed it up on recent approach play, and particularly that short iron distance between 75 and 150 yards. I'm kind of average on around the green here as well because the golf course is so short. It's not like you're going to get an incredibly low greens and regulation percentage. Like players are going to hit a lot of greens on this golf course, and yes, it's a really hard golf course around the greens. Like the bunkering is really challenging here. That's another thing that members have talked a lot about. Like I expect the sand save percentage on this golf course to be very low, but I can't put at more of a standard weight around the greens on a golf course that I expect to have a fairly high greens and regulation percentage, comparatively speaking. But like putting from 5 to 15 feet, putting on fast greens, putting on bent grass greens, like how players putt at a golf course like the Masters, stuff like that is important here, right? How do players perform from 5 to 15 feet? How do players perform overall on fast bent grass greens? I looked a lot at short courses, overall performance on short courses, some overall performance in the Northeast, right? Like I think Ridgewood and Plainfield, which are two former hosts of the Barclays and the Northern Trust. And I don't like to do the thing where it's like, okay, because these guys are good at these golf courses in the Northeast, and that's going to necessarily be predictive of another golf course in the Northeast. But even a course like Ridgewood, not just because it's in the Northeast, Ridgewood it's a Donald Ross, but it still has that old school classical architecture as well as the same Parklands aesthetic of the fast bent grass greens that are heavily undulated, thick rough around the greens, that thick, well, the rough here is the turf tall fescue. If you've played golf in the Northeast, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That Parkland style of golf course, a lot like what you saw at Oak Hill. Okay, that same aesthetic, Oak Hill, Winged Foot, Ridgewood, Aronimink is another one, Plainfield, which hosted the 2015 Northern Trust. All of those golf courses have the exact same aesthetic for what you're going to see this week. And I think it's valuable to a certain extent identifying the players that have had success before on this style of northeastern Parkland golf course from an aesthetic standpoint. But at the end of the day, if I'm breaking down how this golf tournament is going to be won at the most elementary level, it's all going to come down to short iron play and putting. That's my opinion. You can completely fade it if you want. I could be wrong. I don't think I'm wrong. I mean, usually this type of thing, like looking at the architecture of a golf course and identifying how it's going to play for professionals, it's like my biggest skill in life. So I think I know what's going to happen this week, but who knows? I'm wrong sometimes too. Maybe it turns out to be like, nah, I just don't think so. But maybe we look at the end of the day, there's a massive correlation on distance and, it's 24 under par this week. But I really don't think so. I really don't. I think that the membership is just too damn proud and they care too much about this golf course potentially being in the mix for more tournaments in the future that this feels to me like 14 to 18 under, maybe even harder than I like. If there's anything about this membership, you can expect them and the grounds crew to push the limits as high as they can possibly get in terms of the speed of these greens. The problem, however, is that it's just too short. It's just too short. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how undulating and how difficult the greens are. If you give professional golfers a wedge in their hands on 50% of the golf holes, they're just going to score, right? And so, you know, the hardest version of Harbor Town kind of feels right, right? When Harbor Town is playing firm and fast and super baked out, it's like 13 under, right? And I think that's what we'll get this week. We'll call it 15 to get a nice even number there. But I just think kind of the push and pull of the challenge of these greens, the speed of these greens, the thickness of the rough, and the motivation of this membership to make the golf course hard and how much pride they take in that is pulling against the fact that the golf course is just short at the end of the day. And I think that ultimately ends in a tournament that's won between 14 and 18 under par, right? So I plug all of this in a model and I'll run through the top 20. Okay. Number 1, Rory McIlroy. And Rory is an interesting case this week because, I actually don't think that this is the type of golf course that completely plays into Rory's hands as like a Rory McIlroy golf course, right? A traditional Rory McIlroy course fit. The golf courses where Rory McIlroy has a tremendous advantage over his peers are golf courses that are long and driver heavy and players that don't have the ability to carry the ball 330 yards off the tee are going to be at some tremendous disadvantage, right? And I absolutely think that you can compete at this golf course with any carry distance, right? I think that shorter irons, if they're dialed with their putter and on approach, they have a strong ability and likelihood to compete here. But the thing with Rory this year, um, it's I'm not saying that it's like a Scheffler year in 2024, which is, one of the greatest PGA Tour seasons of all time, but Rory is winning at golf courses that don't even completely play into his hands and accentuate the typical advantage that he has over players off the tee, right? Pebble Beach and TPC Sawgrass. Those are two other golf courses that are very short. Okay. And at TPC Sawgrass and Pebble Beach, it's all about wedge play and putting too, right? And Rory still won at those golf courses, despite the fact that compared to other skill sets, like Rory is not one of the most amazing players in the world from 75 to 150 yards, right? His advantage against the regular PGA Tour player on a golf course that is long iron intensive, that delta between him and his long irons and power off the tee, you're not getting that at this golf course. And Rory is still winning on those types of golf courses. So, for me, I'm certainly not going to bet him here. If I'm going to bet Rory McIlroy at such a short number, which I expect it to be because Scotty Scheffler is not in the field this week, I at least want it to be at a golf course that is super driver heavy, where he's gaining this tremendous advantage with his power off the tee and his long irons. And I don't believe he's going to have that tremendous advantage here. It also might not matter. Like it feels a little bit like what we were dealing with Scheffler last year, where, you know, all of the spots that you would think, oh, Scheffler's not necessarily supposed to win here because this is a golf course where a bunch of other shorter players and less powerful players off the tee, like a Harbor Town, for example, can compete. And Scheffler still just ends up overcoming that and wins it. I mean, that's what Rory is doing this year so far already, is he is just winning those golf tournaments like Pebble Beach and the Players Championship, where it's not his traditional skill set and it doesn't matter. But I'm probably not going to invest at what I expect a betting number to be, I don't know, 6-1, 5-1 in a signature field with only 70 players. Number 2, Russell Henley. And I'll talk about these next couple of players together because they're very similar in a lot of ways. But for me, after Rory, it goes Henley, Morikawa, JT, Fleetwood, Cantlay. Okay. And Henley, Morikawa, JT, and Fleetwood. I mean, Henley, Morikawa, JT, and Fleetwood are probably right now on the PGA Tour, along with Scotty Scheffler, who's not in the field. Those guys have been the best iron players on the PGA Tour this year. And this golf course is really, really going to accentuate iron play right now. In the case of Morikawa, JT, and Fleetwood, even Henley's been a great putter this year. And JT has really turned the putter around. Like in the last couple of starts, JT has been putting really, really well. But this type of golf course, those are actually the players that from a skill set standpoint, it should benefit the most, is who is the best guy inside 150 yards and who is the best putter from 5 to 15 feet. And so those types of players, and with Morikawa this year, he just hasn't been putting well enough to win golf tournaments based on his iron play. But those are the guys really that when I think about this year, who are the best players inside 150 yards, it's Henley, it's Morikawa, it's JT, it's Fleetwood. Number 6 is Cantlay. who's starting to hit his irons really well, but now he can't putt or chip. Shane Lowry, Keegan Bradley, Hideki Matsuyama, Sepp Straka, Daniel Berger, like all of those guys, awesome iron players this year. Awesome iron players inside 150 yards. The putter kind of comes and goes, right? Hideki was putting great at the beginning of the season. He hasn't been putting well whatsoever the last couple of weeks. But like a guy like Sepp Straka and Daniel Berger, who are both putting pretty well this year, and like it does, I know it doesn't feel necessarily like a Sepp Straka or a Daniel Berger golf course. Like particularly with Berger, I really think about him in the Southeast. I really think about him on Bermuda golf courses, and he definitely is a better Bermuda player than he is a bentgrass player. But if we are really talking about the skills that I care about the most, players like Sepp Straka, Daniel Berger would make the most sense to me based on their ability to score when they have a short iron in their hands often. 12 is Ludwig, who's another very interesting case where, he's had some sneaky, really good success on shorter golf courses. Typically you think of Ludwig in a somewhat similar vein to Rory, where the golf courses that Ludwig is going to have his greatest advantage is where things really separate off the tee, and his ability to be long and straight versus other players on golf courses where other players will really get harmed if by their inability to hit it long and straight. Those are the golf courses like Torrey Pines, I would say, for example, Augusta to a certain extent based on its length. Those are the golf course where Ludwig typically feasts, and he's had such great success already putting at the Masters. So Ludwig has shown before under a limited sample size that like he can step up on golf courses that have really firm and fast, undulating, difficult greens. I think a lot of that, to be honest with you, is from playing at Texas Tech. They play at a Tom Doak golf course, I believe. So, like, Ludwig has already developed early in his career. He's shown a real affinity to be able to putt quite well on these fast, difficult, undulating bent grass greens. So I trust him to make putts on this golf course, but I don't think it's going to be the type of golf course that is going to accentuate his tremendous advantage off the tee. Ludwig's going to need to be a really good iron player this week. He just hasn't been a great iron player this season. He has that upside. Like, I believe that Ludwig has a high ceiling with his irons, but we just haven't seen great iron play from Ludwig this season. 13 Brian Harmon, 14 Corey Connors, 15 Victor Hovland, 16 Xander Schauffele, 17 Aaron Rai, 18 Sung J.M., 19 Minwoo Lee, 20 Siwoo Kim. And Xander is kind of an interesting case as well here, because Xander out of the gates this season, coming back from injury, he hasn't been driving the ball great, but his irons have come back in a big way. Like, Xander has already emerged and found himself as a top 5 iron player on the PGA Tour this season, right? So if I look at what Xander is doing well right now, he's hitting his irons really well, and all the other aspects of his game have been a little hit or miss to start the season. So, from an iron play perspective, I do think that Xander has that ability inside 150 yards to be able to really separate on this golf course with his iron play. Can he make enough putts? We haven't seen that putting upside yet from Xander, at least in 2025. And the reason why Xander was the second best player on the PGA Tour last year and won 2 majors, is because of all the elite players, Xander was a top 10 putter in the world. I mean, Xander was a better putter than all of these elite players. Xander's better putter than Scotty, better putter than Rory, better putter than Colin, better putter than JT, better putter than Cantlay, Fleetwood, Hideki, Ludwig, all of those guys. Xander was the best putter of them last year, and we haven't seen that putting come back for him. But the fact that this golf course is really going to accentuate that iron play, I really like that for Xander. And um, Hovland's interesting as well, because he, just like Ludwig as well, has shown some really great upside and ability on fast, firm, undulating bent grass greens. Like, Hovland actually putts really well at the Masters. He putts really well at Muirfield Village, Olympia Fields, all of those parkland golf courses with that northeastern aesthetic and the firm and fast greens and the rough all around the greens. Hovland's performed really well at those golf courses. And I don't think this also could be a case almost like Oak Hill, another golf course that Hovland's been awesome at, where the shot around the greens here, there's only so much you can do. It's just a lot of that hack out from thick rough around the greens that you see in the past at Oak Hill and Muirfield Village and Olympia Fields. There's a little bit of that going on here, and the greens and regulation percentage is going to be higher at this golf course than the previously mentioned golf courses, because the approach shots are just going to be a lot shorter. So Hovland's an interesting one to monitor too. I feel incredibly confident in my breakdown of this golf course. Who's going to win? No idea. Could be any of those guys. Seriously, could be any of those guys. I think where I'm leaning right now is Morikawa. But, I went to the well with Morikawa at the Heritage at 12-1, and he played like shit. So Morikawa has a strong tendency of playing like shit on the golf courses that should theoretically be a great fit for him. And he's still so good that you're never going to really get that great betting number on Morikawa. He's just had too many high-end finishes this year, and he's just such a model and statistical darling that idiots like me are going to bet him at any number that is at least somewhat palatable because of what we are seeing in the numbers. I don't know. Like Morikawa and Cantlay have really let me down this year. I've lost a fair bit of Morikawa's been like fine for me in DFS. I've had him as a core play a couple times in DFS, and he's been solid, like at the Masters and the Players. He was a core play for me and like finished T12, T13. He's not killing you, right? But it's a big investment and a big ask for him to win the golf tournament. And he's just not doing that even close to the rate that he's going to be priced at. So again, for me, is Henley going to win another signature event? Probably not, but God, I think it's a great golf course for Russell Henley. JT, is he going to win signature events back to back? I will say this about Philly Cricket and JT. Philly Cricket is a perfect JT golf course if he continues to putt this way. And JT's been putting great the last couple of weeks. JT is, bar none right now, outside of Scheffler, I don't know if there's a player that I would take above Justin Thomas in terms of iron play inside 150 yards on the PGA Tour right now outside of Scheffler. I really think for me, it's like Scheffler, JT, Morikawa, Henley, Straka. Morikawa, Henley, Straka, Fleetwood, really. Lowry, too, a little bit with that key separator of short iron approach play, which I think is going to be tremendously important this week. So I don't know. I'm going to mull it over. Those are the guys that I think make the most sense. But we'll see what the market looks like. Um, I have a feeling of the ways it's going to move, but I really don't know what other people are going to do this week. I mean, I have my breakdown of the golf course. I'm very confident in my breakdown of the golf course, but when you get a golf course that no one's ever seen before and we have no data on, I mean, you could see stuff all over the map. I mean, you could get that this is going to be really hard and a scrambling fest. You can get that this is bombers off the tee. You can get that this is going to be super, super easy and a putting contest. I kind of don't really believe any of those things, but I'm very interested to see where the betting markets go this week. I know where I will be going, but who knows? So, yeah, I mean, those are probably the guys that I'm going to look at the most. Morikawa, Fleetwood, Cantlay, Straka, Berger, you know. I've been betting Berger a ton, and he's been so good. Like, he's been just a top 20 machine. He's finished top 20 this year in like 8 out of 10 starts. Okay, with a couple high-end finishes in there as well. I was on him for both of his top threes at the Heritage and Phoenix. And I think I probably just got to ride it out with Berger on a golf course that, in my opinion, is going to be defined quite a bit by iron play and putting. Iron play and putting right now, Berger is top 5 to 7 in the world with what he's doing at those two specific skills. And you really want to play him on golf courses where the weakest aspect of his game compared to other elite players is distance off the tee. That's not going to hurt him this week. That's not going to hurt him one bit. So that will do it for me. If you want more info on the golf course, I'm going to be talking to members all week. We're going to have some of our folks, some of our members, some of our team members on site this week for the practice rounds and the tournament rounds. Hop in that Discord, join insidesportsnetwork.com. It's a great time to sign up for a month right now, because if you sign up for a month, you are getting this week all the way through the PGA Championship and US Open. So if you sign up for a month right now, you're getting 2 majors in there. And we have a lot of people that just only sign up for the week for a major championship and then cancel and then come back for the week, the next major championship. The way better deal is now when you have 2 majors in the span of the month. Take the discount on the month, and we would love to have you for these next 2 major championships. I cannot believe Quail Hollow is right around the corner. Like, I'm already recording my Quail Hollow deep dive with Bamford early this week. That's going to be the other podcast that I put out this week, is going to already be our major deep dive with Steve Bamford. It feels like we were doing this for the Masters yesterday. But we are in the heart of the PGA Tour golf season. I'm going to be working my ass off over the next couple of weeks to give you guys the best information and breakdown and ownership for the matter, which has been like the new project that I have worked on this year. Then I can at least viclap how much success I have had on the ownership front. I have put so much time into getting good at ownership, and now it's really paid off to the point where I'm super, super confident in my ownership and the ownership that you will be getting at these major championships going forward. So that's it for me. Enjoy your Sundays. It looks like Spieth, who I bet this week, not in the without Scotty market though. So it's definitely going to be a loser, it looks like. But it looks like Spieth is making a nice little charge on Sunday. Not going to win, but I felt like that, is turning out to be a decent bet that will net me probably $0 this week, but upwards and onwards. Let's have an awesome week at Philly Cricket. From an architecture standpoint, this is my shit. This is the type of golf course that I get super, super fired up for. It's going to be a really great viewing event. Like, you are going to see PGA Tour players hit some really interesting golf shots and really struggle. There are going to be high scores this week, right? There's going to, like, if you are not dialed with your short irons and you start missing greens with your short irons, you are really going to struggle on this golf course because it's really tough around the greens. It's really tough putting inside 10 feet. Like, this is a really tough golf course to make a bunch of 7 to 8 footers for par, just like you see at the US Open, right? That's what makes US Open so hard, is you just have all of these 7 to 10 footers for par all day on these golf courses like Oakmont and Winged Foot, with like the best greens in America. And it's just going to be really fun to watch this week. So that will do it for me. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Hop in the Discord. We would love to have you, and we will see you back on this podcast later this week. Cheers.